Welcome to the 509th episode of the Jami Dulaney Plant-Based Wellness Podcast. My name is Jami Dulaney, and I'm your host. I'm a plant-based cardiologist and endurance athlete living in Southwest Florida. Welcome, and thank you for listening. Well, it's a couple days to the long play 50K, and I was corrected on my last podcast. The next race is the Skunk Ape, and it's not 50K, it's 50 miles. I knew that. But in my head, I like to think 50K. And then we'll have a 50-miler at Cruel Drill in May. So I've got a couple 50-milers after this 50K. Looking to try some new shoes out on the 50K this weekend. I broke them in a little bit. And just get things lined up and practice some things for a 50-mile. And hopefully we're going to start, this is the season beginning this weekend, into a progression of longer races, harder races, and getting ready for Leadville 100. I am still doing my strength training program given to me by Nathan twice a week. This week was a little lighter, somewhat of a strength training taper, but a little bit more mobility, a little less reps, but nevertheless keep things moving. And keep mobile is the answer. So I've tapered off running this week, did some striders on Monday, and then just easy into getting ready for the weekend. A couple things have happened that everything always works out and comes in full circle and works out and goes around. I had a discussion with someone trying to motivate them a little bit, give them some encouragement, and I fell back on my ultra mindset approach to apply to their healthcare approach. And I was informed that, well, this person really wasn't into athletics, and it didn't really connect for them. And it's like, I guess I made a mistake. Having done marathons and ultra marathons, to me, it applies so much to life that I apply it to life. But it does make sense that if you've never done those things, it's hard to apply them to your life because you've never experienced training for the marathon and actual progression of something. So got to rethink my thought process on motivation. And then I wonder what motivates me to do some of these things. And other people motivate me a lot. When I see people that are accomplishing great things, especially in things that I like, I try to emulate them, follow their training, see what their mindset is about, and learn from them. But there has to be an inner motivation to start with. I don't think, some people see people on TV and it's like, oh, well, they're just, or not TV, but say podcast or whatever. And it's like, oh, they're just freaks of nature, doing certain things. I could never do that. It's not realistic. They're different from me. And again, internally, you concoct a story about why those people don't motivate you. I would hope that you can find someone that motivates you or gives you inspiration to fuel the fire from within, because I do think the fire from within has to start things out. And I'm going to go all the way back to when my grandson Caleb was born and talk about his switch. I had the honor of being there when he came home with his parents from the hospital, and it was their first child, and I hadn't been around a newborn since I had my daughter, so we were all a little rusty. And Caleb, early on, we found had a switch. He could be warm and fed and dry, but he'd have this switch that he would just cry. And we didn't really know why, and we tried a variety of different things to calm him down. And then the switch would flip and he would be perfectly fine. And we really wouldn't know what turned the switch on and what was the switch that turned it off. But he always had a switch. And one thing that I observed that was very calming for him was when his dad and mother held him and walked with him, they would say over and over again, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay." I don't know if they really believed it or not, but they kept saying, "It's okay, it's okay." And that kind of became the theme song for the Meinrich household. It's okay, it's okay. And it's calming. You should try it. It's okay. And I believe that it changed that little infant's mindset. And he believed and was motivated that it was okay. And gradually, the switch was not quite as violent and unexpected, and it became easier. And even to this day, he can switch pretty quick, but he can get a hold of it by just a little assurance that it's okay. Some of the things that I've been working on with my mindset coach for ultra running is not letting my mind get out ahead of my body and not constructing a dialogue that convinces me to slow down, stop, don't go there because it's not okay. And the reality of it is your body is much stronger than your mind. Or I guess more resilient than your mind. We can concoct a story in our heads that make us stop, and maybe it's a protective mechanism, but the body has a lot more fight in it than the mind does, more often than not. And you can witness that by troubleshooting. Self-talk, it's okay. A little bit of food, changing stride, knowing that you have control, and that you can adjust the knobs a little bit to control your environment, kind of makes it okay and changes the mindset. It's amazing how you can feel so poorly and then feel okay with just a little food or even just a little distraction. The laugh is, or some of the people say, it never always gets worse. Sometimes when something else hurts, what you were focusing on doesn't hurt. Or if your mind's taken off of what you think is bad, it doesn't seem to be that bothersome all of a sudden. Or you just simply get out of your funk. When you're dark, cold, tired, wet, you can start to concoct a story of why this is just not a good thing and somebody would have to be stupid to partake in it. On the other hand, why did you sign up in the first place? It's to see how far you could push your body. And your body's willing to go for the most part. It may slow down, but it's willing to go. It's the mind that tends to hold us back from either continuing in a race or starting something in the first place or continuing a nutrition path. There's nothing for me to eat. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to eat like I do. It's just too big of an ordeal. I don't want to have to cook. You know the drill. I have had the pleasure in being people's physician for long periods of time, years. I have one patient that I'm still his physician. He's 96 years old, and I did his heart catheterization when I was in my 30s. That's how far we go back. I'm 62, by the way. But I've also had the opportunity to be and know my patients very well, which I'm honored. But I've also watched several of them pass and several family members pass and take their last breath, so to speak, quite vividly. And one thing that always comes back around is that the body is much stronger than the mind. The body continues to go and fight well beyond what anybody ever thought it could do. You can look at people that have been in horrific car wrecks or had treatments for years and years and years, and their body just keeps going despite the abuse. People that abuse their body, smoke, drink. The body is so resilient and keeps going long after the mind has given up. And I've observed people that do quite well with their therapies if their mindset is okay. Those people with a positive attitude tend to follow their body and continue to go despite things that may have tripped a lot of other people up. And I had the pleasure, I don't know, it was pleasure, I had the opportunity to observe that with one of my patients recently. She has had a diagnosis of multiple cancers, but most recently had a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis that she's actually survived with for years, which is somewhat unheard of. As a side note, if any doctor tells you you have, so many months to live, get a new doctor because the doctor's not in charge. And we don't have crystal balls. But certainly by observation, there are some cancers that people tend not to do well with for very long, and stage 4 lung cancer is one of them. But This woman had a wonderful mindset and didn't seem to follow those directions, nor need to care or hear about them. And she went on about her life. She had therapies, and she didn't really let the therapies bother her. She even had breaking her back, her upper back, compression fractures of her upper back because of osteoporosis, despite the cancer. So not necessarily, it wasn't associated with the cancer, it was another problem altogether. So it's multiple fractures of her back, chemotherapy, lung cancer. She kept going. They traveled, they went places, she went to garden clubs, she interacted with people, and I never saw her down. She had a positive attitude. This is what we can do. She would come into my office and I would give her mobility exercises for her back. Many people would have been disabled and bedridden just because of the fractures that she sustained in her back, but kept going. And we had long talks in the office about positive mindsets and looking forward to doing things and going with what you can do as opposed to what you can't do, and she did very well. The last therapy that she received recently was radiation therapy, and she ended up in the hospital with pneumonia, and turns out that the radiation actually caused a hole between her esophagus and her trachea that was causing her frail lungs to be flooded with sputum and whatever she ate. Her initial attitude was whatever we have to do. So despite poor care in the emergency room, nothing to eat, waiting for days to become stable enough to get this test to see whether she truly had a hole in her esophagus, she continued to just move along. We kind of joked in the hospital that I would go in and her color looked really good for somebody that had pneumonia and that was on 100% oxygen, and her hair looked good. And I said, we always joked, and my mother used to say, it's better to look good than to feel good. And so the idea was, let's get through this, let's get a plan and see what we can do. However, the study showed that the radiation had caused an unrepairable hole in her esophagus connecting to her trachea. The morning of the test, I went in to speak with her, and all of a sudden, there was a switch that flipped. She said, I don't think that I'm going to make it out of here, and I don't want the oxygen anymore, the BiPAP, the really high flow, you can imagine an air hose up your nose trying to put high pressure oxygen up your nose. So I can't take it anymore, it's too uncomfortable. I don't want it. And at that point, it was a light switch that flipped, and it was over. The test was done. I don't know that she ever knew the results. But at that point, her mind had made a decision, no more. Despite not being able to oxygenate, because she continued to have sputum that would go into her lungs, and she didn't want the high flow oxygen anymore, so her oxygen saturations were in the low 80s. Despite that, her body continued to fight for almost 3 more days. So her body continued to fight almost 2 weeks without any significant nutrition, and then 2.5 days without sufficient oxygen. I am in no way saying that her decision was right or wrong. She fought an extremely hard battle. It's just the observation that I see over and over again in very different ways is how our minds, how the switch can turn, and we create a story from that moment forward that our bodies don't often get the memo, and things people fight. Their bodies seem to continue on, and so despite people when they're healthy saying, "Oh, I don't care if so and so I do this and it kills me, I'm not afraid to die or anything," there's this real inherent in our being that our bodies keep trying to go despite what our minds may think. I'm not sure an outside influence can make much decision or make an influence on people's decision to turn their switch. But I do know as physicians, it's our responsibility to not cause a negative influence and to help write that story in a negative way. It is our job to support the patient, the person in their decisions, but it is not our right to take it away. On the other hand, I think we dropped the ball quite a bit by not helping people rewrite their story that they can actually get better. We give people, it's not your fault, there's nothing you can do, you're too far gone. That's more of the support that we give. We'll just put a Band-Aid on it, give you this medication. Don't expect to be able to do this or do that. You're limited. That's more of what you get from the medical community in general. People that do well and reverse their lifestyle diseases have an overwhelming resolve that it's going to be okay, and this is what I'm going to do, and I have control, and this is my story. And I think it's really important for everybody to know that they have their own story and to recognize that they have their own switch. Some people may call the switch a trigger that causes them to give in and eat what they want, or whatever it is that causes them to change course. But it's a mindset switch, not a body switch. And it's not something that we don't have a choice in. I have seen people lead a long life of misery because they don't ever flip that switch off, and they assume that there's nothing that they can do. And despite that, their body keeps going on and on and on. And there can be so many things going right with their body, they just focus on the few things that's going wrong in their body. I think more often than not, people do an assessment to figure out what's wrong with their body than actually what's going right. And if you actually did, you'd realize that your body's a whole lot better than you thought it was, and you shouldn't have given up on it. The other story that always impressed me was the Louis Zapparini story, and I think the movie and the book was called Unbroken, where he was an Air Force pilot that was shot down. He wasn't shot down, but his plane wrecked into the Pacific. He floated around for 140 days, only to be captured by the Japanese, tortured, starved, and in the prison camp for years, and finally released. And even while he was in the prison camp, they would make him race the prison guards, and his body had enough will, despite being very malnourished, to give it all it had to, compete against these people. His mindset was he never really gave up. But the most interesting thing that I observed in the story was that despite that, he lived ultimately longer than any of his siblings or friends. So he outlived everybody despite having such a trauma for years early on his life. So it just, again, goes to show you what the body can come back from. And, after having practiced medicine for a lot of years, you see what people can come back from if they continue to have a positive mental attitude and don't flip that switch for very long. I think there are people that flip the switch like Caleb, and they flip it for a little bit, and then you flip it back. I think that's human nature, is to have that switch. But I think we have to be very mindful that we don't flip the switch off and leave the room, so to speak. It's kind of funny to me that people are looking for all these different hacks, supplements that they can take, medications that may cause them to numb their mind, flip the switch perhaps, not for them not to have to be involved, wake me up when it's over type approach to life, when the most important part of being healthy is the mindset of how do I want to navigate my own health journey. To me, a life well lived is a good story that the person stayed in the game and had a positive mental outlook despite obstacles. The ultimate outcome is the same for all of us. It's how you play the game that really is what matters. So if you just apply that reasoning, there's no such thing as not being able to get your weight under control, get your glucose under control, get a better VO2 max. There's no such thing. There's only opportunity. It's not necessarily a linear line. There are ups and downs and successes and failures, but it's taking time to assess, reassess, test, and go on to see what's working and what's not working, and to be observant of your current mindset or story that you're telling. Is it a story of doomsday is approaching or eternal hope? Is it the wheels are falling off, or what do I have to do next to change things? The best part about it, nobody can write your story. You can only write your own story. And I can tell you I'm very honored to be educated by my patients who have written such beautiful stories in their life. That being said, we can help you learn a new language if you want, the language of plant-based nutrition, the language of exercise and mobility. Our full-time members, and actually all our members, from $25 all the way up to $275 per month, have access to our mobility Zoom classes that are recorded in movement, lectures on nutrition, lectures on movement, and monthly challenges for wellness, tons of recipes. So if you would like help just by going on our website, or you like in-person contact, or not in-person, but virtual contacts, or if you live in Florida, you can have an in-person contact or a consult. Going over to our website, drdulaney.com, DOCTORDULANEY, and find out how we could help you to rewrite your story. It is amazing how good you feel when you can flip that switch on to positive. And if you know you have a switch that gets you headed down a wrong road, I'm too tired to cook, I don't feel like going for a walk, there's nothing that I can do for it, it's just in my genes, I'm always going to be in pain. There are steps you can do to change that scenario. Limiting your choices and having menus planned so when you're coming home late than you expected, you have a dinner plan, you have a menu, and you have the food already there. Delegate some of the food prep and cleanup if you have a family. Set your alarm out and have your clothes laid out so you're ready to go in the morning. Don't try to mask chronic pain. Find out what the root cause of it is and address it. Assess the situation and find out what the facts truly are, not the story that you may be telling yourself to change the direction that you're headed in. And as I heard an ultra runner say this week, how will you feel tomorrow about the decisions that you make today? The beauty of all this is that it's an individual decision, and it's nobody else's decision to make, and you need to stick to that. You get to control the switches. I'm headed to the trail this weekend, and I have to take all those things with me because I may have a few switches that try to turn on myself. So I'll talk to you next week about the head games that I'm going to play and that maybe I played. So wish me luck and happy running, and may all your switches lead you in a positive direction. Thanks for listening.